We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm Mark Angelides. Continue to be joined by senior political analyst and long-time host of this here show, Tim Donner. Thanks for sticking with us, Tim. Now, at the end of the last segment, you brought up a point about whether Democrats could reclaim the congressional control in 2026. And your supposition was that if they ditch the, let's call it what it is, the woke agenda, as it's often referred to, if they ditch that, they have a better chance of winning back the people who were disaffected by their push in that direction. I think one of the key indicators on that will be what happens with the media. Now, the media appears to be, let's call it the legacy media, as it were. It seems to be flailing and trying to find its mojo. But if the denizens of that fourth estate, if they continue with their push on, we must have open borders, every illegal immigrant that crosses deserves health care, deserves every right that Americans have, that taxpayers pay for, then I think that the Democrats will stay with that particular agenda because it buys them the airtime. But is the media essentially a sinking ship which the Democrats might tie themselves to the mast of?
Well, I think that the same idea applies to the media as it does to the Democrats. Can they turn this ship around and raise their credibility again from 30%, which is where it's at now? 30% of Americans trust the media, which means 70% do not trust the media.
Seems about right.
As Bobby Kennedy Jr. pointed out, when his uncle, John F. Kennedy, was elected president, you had the likes of Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley, and it was about an 85% trust level for the media. That has now been cut more than in half. But part of it, too, is the fact that old media is realizing they're being supplanted by new media. Joe Rogan matters a lot more now than Joy Reid does. Millions more are taking in social media and podcasts, both, than are going back to the traditional sources of news. So there's the frustration that they did all they could to try and stop Donald Trump from winning again, and they failed. And their credibility went down even further in the process. And they know they're increasingly becoming more and more irrelevant. And that applies to newspapers as well. How many people below the age of about 40 are reading a newspaper? The answer is the percentage must be minuscule. So the media is in a position now. We see MSNBC is going to be offloaded by, and famously, Elon Musk trolled the leftists on MSNBC and elsewhere by saying, how much does it cost? Which is the same thing he asked before he bought Twitter and turned it into X, which is a lot more expensive, exponentially more expensive than MSNBC. Look, the days of old media, traditional media, are all but over. And the way that they have handled this last decade since Donald Trump entered the political stage has only served to quicken their demise.
It's I think that what's happened here is that they've tied themselves so thoroughly, the Democratic Party and the legacy media, the old guard media, they're so inextricably intertwined that they really can't pull themselves out of the swamp that they're in. I mean, we heard it on I was watching MSNBC all through election night. I had it on one of the many monitors that I were infecting my eyeballs. And they were talking about, we are losing. I can't believe that we are not getting this. We have lost Pennsylvania. And it was really, for me, it was the end of any subterfuge that they're an independent or non-biased organization, which should have been apparent from well before. But to me, this was an open admittance that we're one in the same. And you can't have a media that has trust. As you pointed out, it's down to 30%, the trust in the media. And when they align themselves with a political party, then what are they but a political party mouthpiece? So if, let's say, the Republicans opened their own TV station called Republican TV, would you trust it for unbiased news?
Right, of course not. And, some critics have said, have made the obvious point that the left needs to renounce its attachment to wokeness, to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all this rot that the voters essentially decided to kick out. And one person put it this way, I don't remember who it is, but apologies to whoever it is that actually said this. And it's incredibly insightful. The idea that the Democratic Party should throw its far left wing under the bus is impossible because those people are the bus. So there's a deep entrenchment into left-wing politics in the Democratic Party. Now, look, it can change. 1988, we pointed this out during the election season. Dukakis, disaster for the Democrats in 1988, and along came Bill Clinton and turned it around. George McGovern, disaster in 1972, and along came Jimmy Carter and turned it around, even though he was a failed president and lost in a bid for a second term. So it is possible for a party to turn the ship around, but theirs has been basically for several years now has been the Titanic getting ready to hit the iceberg that was November 5th. But can they turn around their ship of state quickly enough? Will they accept that someone like Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania is the closest thing to the answer to their problems, at least at the presidential level? Or they will insist on being the disloyal opposition, which they've been to Trump. And look, even CBS News reported that 59% of the American people polled approve of the Trump transition. That number was much lower in 2016. So they've got a lot of serious self-evaluation to do. If they do it, they'll probably be okay in a few years. If they don't, they'll continue to sink like they did this year.
It's difficult to turn the ship around, Tim, if you're in a landlocked lake. Thanks for being here, Tim Donner.
Thanks, Mark.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.